This is the new Sigma 17-40 F1.8, released for Super 35 cameras from Fuji, Canon, etc. But today I'm actually going to use it on a full frame Lumix camera to see what kind of utility this combination can bring. And I think the footage kind of speaks for itself. So why would you even want a Super 35 lens on a full frame camera? Well, on older Lumix cameras like the S5 II and the S9, when 4K 60 comes in, it is at a heavy APS-C crop, and well, this just so happens to be an APS-C lens. It's kind of weird, I know, because we're basically turning a full frame camera into a Super 35 camera with a full frame look, but it makes a lot more sense than you might think. So if you do a ton of super slow motion 4K 60 work for like weddings or B-roll or products or whatever, this could be a pretty incredible option for that type of work. So shout out to Sigma for making and sending me out this lens, but of course it has no impact on my video or opinions whatsoever. So anyway, let's see if this lens can really live up to its predecessor. Oh, and while I'm thanking people, thank you for watching my video of all the videos. Hopefully it's getting a cool Lumix perspective, or really any full frame camera with a 4K 60 crop this could be great for. And if it's helping you out, feel free to like the video, leave a comment. So let's go right into the look and performance of this lens. And it's clearly purpose-built for video, which I love. So in crop mode, this essentially turns into a 25 to 60, making it really useful for Super 35 modes. Well, essentially giving you the bokeh of a 2.8 full frame zoom. So for any wedding filmmakers or just any general purpose where you want shallow depth of field, good light gathering, and slow motion, this lens is really becoming a go-to for me. Plus, you're still able to use other awesome modes like MP4 Lite for quick turnarounds, or even get access to a pseudo open gate high frame rate mode. There is a 3.3K 4x3 mode with 48 frames per second. Wow, that is a lot of similar numbers. Having a 4x3 mode in here with a lens that mostly takes advantage of that is really nice, even if the resolution is a little bit lower than 4K. There are other modes that you totally get locked out of, which we'll talk about at the end of the video, so stay tuned for that. In terms of handling, I feel like it slots in nicely with the Lumix full frame primes, where they're all 1.8s, they all have a 67mm filter thread, and if you swap them out on a gimbal, it's just a slight reshuffle to make them balance. But let's talk about the optics really quickly, which were like famously great on the old lens, and they're still fantastic by modern standards, but not quite flawless. So sharpness is really solid to the point where stopping down really only improves vignetting. Bokeh is really pleasant across the board, but there's some swirliness, some cat's eye, but I don't really care. And the separation it gives you just looks great overall. Nothing really distracting in my opinion. I think close focus is one of the most underrated aspects of a lens, and the close focus here is really, really fantastic. But I had noticed doing these weddings that there is at the closest focus some softness and quite a bit of chromatic aberration, which you don't see at other times. So maybe stop down to like 2.8 or 4 when you're working at super close focus distances, but I'm glad they pushed the optics further than other companies might have wanted to. The autofocus, also really great, straight out of the box. It's one of the best performing lenses for the system. And it even seems like it focuses while zooming a little bit better than other Sigma lenses I've used, so no ugly stuttering. Manual focus obviously works great with the linear focus on Lumix cameras, making filmmaking and manual focusing better on the Lumix than it is on any other system this lens is releasing for from Canon, Sony, or Fuji. Oh, and on the topic of focus, the breathing seems pretty well controlled too. I also want to touch on the lens flares really quickly. Overall, it's a pretty good performance, but not quite perfect. I get the classic blue purple Sigma dot, and there's also this really big, admittedly kind of cool ring around the edges of the frame when shooting at the wide end. But like I said, I kind of like that actually. But I feel like I should talk about the build and handling a little bit more. It's actually impressive how much they've shrunk this lens down from its original iteration. The whole point of this lens is to give you full frame results in APS-C modes, but previously you kind of got full frame size with that lens. And so it's nice that this is actually a little bit smaller than your average full frame lens. And then yeah, it's got all the same Sigma stuff, great focus, great zoom, aperture ring, clicky, non-clicky, focus, autofocus, all that sort of stuff, and a very useful custom function button. It's weather sealed, at least at the gasket, but I think overall, and I can probably count the number of weather sealed APS-C lenses on like one hand. Oh, and something I know you video guys are gonna love. We got completely internal zoom. Oh, you love to see it. Even my beloved Leica 10-25 for Micro Four Thirds doesn't have that. Great for gimbal use or matte box use or whatever. Oh, and kind of random, but this is like the first Sigma lens I've used that has like the new branding and stuff on it. So I don't know. Let me know what you guys think. I think it looks pretty good. I also wanted to check and make sure that the noise performance was still decent. So essentially, I know it's not gonna beat the full readout sensor, but hopefully it can at least beat Micro Four Thirds. We're gonna set everything to 4000 ISO just to have an even playing field. And against the GH7 at 4000, it's closer than you might think, but the S5 II, even in Super 35 mode, is still better, and at 12,800, it's pretty much night and day. That being said, when you switch to full frame, sorry, I only had the 85 with me, but full frame 1.8 is so much cleaner at 4000 and even more so at 12,800. So if you're shooting super mega dark environments with high frame rates, maybe the S1 II is gonna be worth it for the no crop and a true 1.8 lens for full frame. But if you just want that blur and a decent low light, then the Sigma 17-40 is still a great option and still better than the equivalent Micro Four Thirds lenses performing in the same situations. And so yeah, while you're stuck in Super 35 mode for 24, 25, 30, 60, 50, whatever, that doesn't come without its drawbacks, being forced into that APS-C mode all the time. Of course, you got the enhanced noise that we talked about a second ago, but additionally that means no 6K of really any kind, no hybrid zoom, and you're getting pushed down to about 10 megapixel resolution in stills. So if you're like a photo hybrid, you might want a different lens, or maybe 10 megapixels is enough for like Instagram. Going into more final thoughts here, it isn't also as optically perfect as the original seemed to be, or as I remember it to be. There's extra flare and chromatic aberrations and stuff, but those are all things I don't really mind, and I think they were good compromises to keep the size of this lens down and the price of this lens down, because it's only about $900 in the US. And so speaking of price, let's compare it to the S1 II. So if you get the S1 II and say the new Lumix 24-60, you get very similar results in terms of the blur and things like that. But of course, you're gonna get that full frame lens with full frame 4K 60, 4K 120. But that setup's gonna be about $4,100 versus something like the S9 or the S5 II. You can probably get these setups for like $2,300 to $2,600, with this Sigma lens in particular being $919, I believe. And that's with all of the tariffs and things like that being factored in. So this price should be solid for a while. Overall, this Sigma lens is a great addition to the Super 35 lens world. It's about time. This is a great update. I think the only downside continuing on is I wish there was a Micro Four Thirds version. There's no way to speed boost this or adapt this or anything like that. I know it's like a super kind of weird zoom range, like a 34 to 80, something like that. But that original lens was such an iconic combo for Micro Four Thirds shooters that even to this day, I do feel like there's a group of like GH6 or GH7 users that would love this lens for Micro Four Thirds, even though it's APS-C, even though it's a weird zoom range, even though you can't speed boost it to 1.2 like the good old days. It would have been nice. So Sigma, what do you think? Could we get this for Micro Four Thirds? Does it make any sense business-wise? I'm sure it doesn't, guys, but just come on. One time for the one time. Let's do it. But yeah, for full frame cameras, 4K 60, I use it all the time as a wedding filmmaker and as a creative tool and for B-roll for my YouTube videos. So this is gonna be, if I can resist the S1 II, this is going to be a great addition to my kit, and it's definitely a lot cheaper.